And welcome back to Talk of the Town. On the phone right now is my next guest. This is Mr. Chris Hadnagy. Am I saying that correctly, sir? Hadnagy, okay. He is the executive director of Social Engineering LLC. He also is the founder of InnocentLivesFoundation.org. And very timely conversation, obviously, in light of events of, earlier this week with Jeffrey Epstein getting rearrested and being held on sex trafficking charges. And it's an amazing story every time I hear it, because it's just I guess I don't understand that mindset, and thankfully, but how people get away with this if so many other people are aware that this is going on is incredible to me. And now with the assistance of technology, the internet, all these other things, there seems to be this kind of dark underworld that has actually made it even easier for this to happen. Is that the case?
It is, and it's been happening. It's been happening for forever. But
right.
You're right. The internet, especially with the advent of the dark web, we see a lot more of these kinds of things occurring, and they are coming into the light. But the hard part is there's no indicator. You look at someone across the room, you may tell they're violent. You may tell that they're high or that they're drunk, but there's no physical indicator that says this person's a child abuser. So it's very hard to spot for people. And
one of the things that has really just been really amazing to me lately is so many people attempting to normalize this behavior.
Yeah, so it is a phenomenon, right? That we're also noticing the same thing. We're noticing there's groups of people that have come out saying that it's appropriate and okay for adults to love children in a sexual way, and even trying to make this a topic of a talking point within political and social atmospheres here in this country. So yeah, it's very, very disturbing to see that occurring.
So let's start out by talking a little bit about your organization, Innocent Lives Foundation. What incentivized you to start working in this arena?
Well, from what you mentioned before, my corporate company, we do security work for major corporations. And in one of my jobs, I had uncovered someone who was producing child abuse material and trading it on the internet. And the work that we did with that organization landed that person in prison. And something dawned on me at that moment. I never thought that my skill set, being in the security world, would ever lead to something that would assist law enforcement. You know, I was just a security guy, not really a law enforcement agent. And that happened one or two more times after that. And after those incidents, I said, I wonder if there's other people in my industry that are having similar experiences, and if we were to band together and work to help law enforcement, if we can use our skills to actually uncover these people that are using the internet to hide. So I started to talk about it, and lo and behold, there was many in my industry who had similar experiences. And I formed the Innocent Lives Foundation now 2 years ago, and our mission statement is to do just that, is to use our skill sets in this security world in order to uncover people who are producing child abuse material or trading and trafficking children through the internet or in person, and then hand them over to law enforcement.
And it is always, again, incredible when you hear about people getting caught in this, and this whole Epstein situation is really just, it's unbelievable to me that the man was walking around free after the first time he got caught with this stuff. You would think that as a society, there's a line that we just don't cross. But how does this all happen? How do people, like, I don't want like details on how they find the victims or even find the dark web, but I mean, I guess the bigger, I'm having a hard time formulating the question here. How does this happen? How do people get into this world?
Yeah, it is a hard question to formulate. And I think just for a second discussing that is why this is such an important topic, because most people can't even formulate the question, so they don't even know that it exists many times.
Right.
You know, we don't want to believe that there's people out there, rich and powerful people, that prey on children. In Epstein's case, looking at what he did, it's so manipulative and so deviant, right? He targeted poor families. He targeted families that were financially destitute. The one case that came out this morning, that young woman, her father had died of AIDS, and he targeted her only a couple years after her father died, and her family was financially destitute. Now offering her money for non-sexual services, right? He says, come to my house, you can hang out, it's a great big mansion, You can give me massages and I'll pay you $300. And to a financially destitute family with no father, that probably sounded like paradise for that young girl. And he's very, very smart and deviant in the way he did it. He didn't approach that young girl. He had a woman that he probably had abused before that now was the person who went to actually talk to those young girls. More trusting, right? Now they can trust a woman approaching. It doesn't appear to be so threatening. Now, once they're in the house and they got a taste of the money, that's when he starts to apply sexual tension to them. And in this one case, at least we're seeing many more, he actually ended up raping these poor girls after they were trapped in their home, in his home.
About a month or so ago, I spoke to the producer of this movie called Open Secrets. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's the one about what's going on out in Hollywood with the pedophile rings. And he kind of had the same sort of stories where, it's this trust that they find very vulnerable people who they think they can sort of dangle these little things in front of, these little sort of, we're going to make you a star, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they build that trust and then abuse that trust. And knowing that these children are so young and so confused about all of this that they may think that, well, this is just the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so this is what we see on the web all the time, right? They go to these forums that are developed for teens and young ones to go and talk about their lives and their problems. So you have a group, 100 or so young people in this chat room talking about how bad their parents are. Their parents just got divorced. There's life problems. Kids at school are bullying them. And in that mix is a predator who makes believe he's a 12, 13, 14-year-old person like them. He identifies with them. He talks about his problems. He paints a whole picture. Now there's a trust factor. He starts finding out where they live. He picks a target that's close to where he is or where he will be. And eventually there's an offer to, hey, we should meet. We should meet and hang out. And the young person still thinks they're dealing with someone of their age. So they trust. And then when they meet, this is how sex trafficking begins to occur. We start to see these cases all the time where the young people will meet them at a public place. They're waiting for another 13-year-old to show up. Instead, a van pulls up, pulls them in, and these young kids could be abducted and then turn into a life of trafficking. It's one of many ways this is occurring. But most of the time, the way we see it is that these predators are starting to identify with the children on their level, in their world, with their problems.
What sort of numbers are we talking about here? I mean, I'm loath to imagine that this is as large as it could possibly be. But then you see cases like with Jeffrey Epstein, and there's hundreds, potentially thousands of victims of him.
Yeah, well, according to there's a group called the Equality Now. They estimate that sex trafficking industry pulls in $99 billion a year.
Lord.
$99 billion. I mean, just let that settle for a minute. I think it was 2017. The International Labor Organization estimated there was 24.9 men, women, and children that were victims of human trafficking around the globe. These numbers are staggering. 51% of those victims are going to be women, and 20% of those are going to be girls, which would mean underage females. That accounts for 71% of all the victims, and those numbers are going to be female. And whereas just the amount of cases that occur that are getting reported to Department of Homeland Security, to NCMEC, we just see these things constantly growing each and every year. And the very systems that are designed to supposedly save these kids, like social services, the foster care system, generally are filled with people who are predators against children, making it even a more dangerous atmosphere for these poor kids.
Wow, that's disturbing to hear as well. Now let's talk a little details on this Epstein case here, because his first time was that he was prosecuted on this was about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and then he walked. He walked with minor repercussions.
How did that happen?
From that. That's a really good question, and we would all love to know the answer to that, but it seems like the more power and money you have, the easier it is to get a great lawyer to paint a different picture, and all they need is that reasonable doubt enough to just walk away from a case until there's solid proof, and money and power seem to be the drivers for those kinds of things.
Now, one of the other issues that it seems to be coming up here is the question that perhaps he might have something on a whole lot of other very powerful people, which may have gone a long way in helping him get that light sentence.
And all I can say to that is that we'll probably find out if there's truth to that or not as this continues to come out in the near future. But again, what we see with these things, when you see someone that has done as much bad as he has, and he walks from it, money and power, those are the two things you can easily see that cause someone to be able to quickly walk from a crime of that caliber.
Now, some of the things that we do know, that there have been people who were traveling to that island, some very famous people in the motion picture industry, some politicians. How difficult is it to make a case against someone like that when there's really probably not going to be any evidence unless he personally has it?
Yeah, so you're going to need the people to come forward, right? And that's what we're seeing now. There's a lot of these when they were girls, but now they're grown women. They're coming forward and they're saying, this is what happened to me. Their stories will need to corroborate. And then, again, without proof, this becomes the issue in a court of law, right? Without proof, it's easy enough to build a reasonable doubt that may make it so it's very hard to prosecute and to convict. So they need to find some proof on him, videotape or something that can at least put him in that situation, having sexual encounter with a minor, and have enough proof that can just make that case solid.
And I guess one of the things that they depend on as well, too, is the fact that a lot of these victims will not speak out, right?
Oh, fear. I mean, think about, you have, like you said, some of the most powerful people that have lawyers that probably cost more for a few hours than they make in a year, and there's just so much fear being applied to these people. They speak about it. They can have their families removed from their homes. They can have their jobs lost. They can, and this happened how many years ago? Now some of these women are grown women, and they're thinking, well, this is 10 years, 12 years ago. I've moved on. And it's a sad, sad fact to see this happen all the time. Again, money and power creates a situation where these people can easily make an environment where they can get away with these crimes because of lack of proof.
It's an incredible phenomenon. I mean, we saw it recently with Harvey Weinstein and everything he was getting away with, that everybody now, was talking about as being an open secret. Everybody knew what was going on there. Everybody knows now what's going on out in Hollywood with the pedophile rings. Now we have this guy Epstein, who for the second time is now behind bars because of this. And again, the difficulty in getting people to open up on this, that's been a conversation we've had for a couple of years. But as a child victim, it's got to be even worse.
I agree. So, like what you just said, so we need one of the adults involved to come forward as proof. As a child victim, I think what you said before, it really paints a very valid picture. Sometimes these children just think this is the way the world works. This is what has to happen. I made some money doing this, so this must be my fault. Mm-hmm. I came to this guy's house and I did this, so this is my fault. I'm really to blame for what occurred to me. And that thought process alone could make them never report it, can make them never come forward, can make them never confess to it, because they feel that it's their fault for what occurred.
Yeah, they're the guilty ones.
Yeah, many times groomers and abusers will reconfirm that. They'll tell children that exact same thing. They'll say, you're just as guilty as I am in this, so if this ever comes out, you'll go to prison too, and they're convinced of this. They're convinced that their lives will be ruined if this ever comes forward. So you're right. You see these kids and now growing up, and they will just not go forward with this. They don't want to relive the horrific events they went through.
So what is your organization, Innocent Lives Foundation? What do you do as far as helping these children, catching these predators?
So we look for people that are actively abusing children, whether they're producing child pornographic images, or they're trading in children online, or they're trading in human trafficking data or stories, or actual children, and we're uncovering who they are in the real world. So we're not interacting with them. We're not trying to entrap them. We're not making believe we're a 13-year-old girl that's interested. We're actually following them through digital means, so we find out where they are in the real world, and then we're handing that identity over to proper law enforcement agencies to say, hey, here's a person who has traded in child pornography. Here's a person who's actually trafficking children, and here's all their details. Go and arrest them. And we're trying to make the job for law enforcement much easier by handing them raw data files that they can now go and make actionable attempts to get these people off the streets and not have to do all the legwork.
And how many people do you have working in your organization?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So when we first started, we had so many volunteers start up. We have a very arduous process when it comes to to onboarding people. As you can imagine, the content for what we do is quite hefty. So we have a very arduous process when it comes to getting people onboarded. So right now, in our research recruit, we call the PIT. That's the Predator Identification Team. We have 8 people. And then we have 10 people in our other volunteers that help with development and marketing and other things like that. And then we have six people in our board of directors right now. So that brings us up to about 24 folks working with the ILF.
I remember reading a story a while back about police officers, and I'm speaking with Chris Hadnagy. He is with InnocentLivesFoundation.org. It's a tech organization that uses and searches the internet and other dark web areas for child pornography, sex trafficking, all kinds of predators who may be out there preying on these women and children. And I remember reading a story about police officers who were working in this arm of law enforcement and how disturbing it was for them and how it really impacted them psychologically. Having to see what was happening to children and having to look at this evidence to actually see what was going on. Is this something that is of concern in your organization as well?
Oh, very much a concern. You read these accounts of these people who are paid moderators for social media companies like Facebook or other big social media companies, and the damage that happens to them psychologically, having to even know the crimes that are being committed against children, humans, and animals across the globe, and it's damaging. I knew this from speaking to some people who do this for a living when I started this organization. So the very first thing I did when I started the ILF was I found a mental health professional that works with the ILF, and we have mandated monthly visits with mental health professionals for all of the people who volunteer for us. So if you volunteer and you do this work and you're researching into these bad guys, you have to meet with a mental health professional at least once a month in order to make sure that you're safe, your mind is safe, that your thinking is safe, and that you can get good help if you are struggling. And since we're a volunteer organization, we also tell people if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling stressed, you take a break.
Yeah.
Right? To stop. I mean, tell us you need a month off. Tell us you need to stop for a little while. We have this very important philosophy in our organization. If you're out there and you help save one kid, but to save one kid, you damaged yourself or your family, it's not a good trade-off. Right? It's not a fair trade-off to say that you hurt your family, but you saved one other kid. So we have to be able to do this work while also maintaining our own health and our own mental health and our own physical health. So I think it's very important to us that this mental health program is something that we view as integral to our success as an organization.
Well, I would imagine because it's hard enough just being on the periphery and doing the stories and reading the stories and having to be aware of what's happening out there. But when you get as personal as you are with it and seeing the victims and what has happened to them, and even just reading the accounts is enough to just crush someone's soul.
It is. Many times. So we have this wonderful piece of technology that we had built for us that blurs images and videos so we don't have to see the content of anything that is truly horrific. But like you said, just reading the stories, just reading what happens to these kids, reading the comments that these people say about children, the way they talk about children is so mentally disturbing. It's so hard to deal with because, like you, most of us here are normal people that don't view children in that way.
Right.
And to think that there's people out there that actually view children as objects, it's so hard sometimes for your brain to grasp that, especially if you have a family of your own. You would never, ever think of your children that way. And then to have somebody talk about their children that way, you really have to work hard to make sure you're mentally safe and you're well so you could do this work properly.
Yeah, I'll tell you, because I hear stories. We all hear stories every once in a while where a father walks in on something and happening to his daughter, and then next thing you know, he's behind bars for manslaughter. And it's like, as a father of a daughter and a son, I can see it. You know,
Yep, I'm with you.
I can kind of justify that, and maybe I'd give that guy a definite pass. Because, I mean, just reading the accounts of what Epstein did, I mean, with this young girl that came out today, it's vile. It's vile to believe that people like that are walking around on this planet.
It is. It's not only vile. It makes you could see how someone could be so angry at it, and you could, like you said, you can almost justify the actions. And that's the other part. That's why I think for our organization it's so important that we keep ourselves in check, because we're not a vigilante group.
Right.
We're not out there, we're not making believe we're Batman. We're not beating them up. We're not putting their names online. We're not looking for mob justice. As awesome as that would be in some cases, that's not the goal of our organization. It is proper judicial handling of these matters is so important. It's just so important, because if you don't do it that way, someone gets off because you have one flaw in the case, and then someone like Epstein is walking around the rest of his life free to abuse children, and we don't ever want that to be on our conscience.
So, Chris, obviously this is a nonprofit organization that you put together.
Yes.
And obviously as a nonprofit, it costs money to do the work that you do. So if someone wanted to help support your organization, how could they help you out?
They can go to innocentlivesfoundation.org. And there's a lot of information on there. We have blogs. We have guides for helping parents how to monitor their kids. But there's also a donation section. They can donate one time. They can donate monthly. We have people that helped us out in every way possible. So we definitely appreciate that. And like you said, it does cost money to keep us running and to keep all the infrastructure of things that we're doing. So we appreciate the support.
Well, one suggestion might be to take every penny that Jeff Epstein has and give it to an organization like yours.
We would definitely take that and do a lot of good with it.
Because I mean I'm glad that he's caught again, and I'm glad we're having this conversation and we're talking about these things, because the awareness is probably the most important thing. You know, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. And again, it's a disturbing trend we see, and not only in the trafficking of children and women, but also in this normalization of it, and these people trying to say, well, it's a legitimate sexual identity. It's like, oh my dear Lord, where have we gone in this society when people are actually trying to put up a defense for this? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%.
So Chris Hadnagy, again, the organization is innocentlivesfoundation.org, and keep up the good work, and thanks so very much. I'm glad you're out there doing this hard work, and anything we can do to help you out, just keep us in the loop.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris, for your time, and thanks for the information.